Welcome back to Let's Talk Racism. I'm your host, Harrison Paul, and today we are going to talk about education, educational system, and if it really caters to us as Black people, the meaning of education, and if Africans were so great before, why do we feel like now we need an educational system in order to be great? Civilizations came from Africa. Egyptian civilization. I know they wanted to make you believe that it was actually, fairer skinned people because they don't want you to believe anything good came from Africans. But we know the pharaohs were Black. I think I might throw some evidence in this episode.
Some serious hair, huh? Looks just like the hair on our heads today. So if anybody tries to tell you that Egypt is a white civilization, you can point out this hair. So those of you who have your cameras, you want to make sure you take a good picture of it. But this is what Gaston Maspero, an Egyptologist, said about the hair in the Nile in Egypt. He says the hair was inclined to be wavy and even to curl into little ringlets, but without ever turning into the wool of the Negro. But take a look at that hair. It looks like wool, doesn't it? This is a picture of the hair that's on a figure that was found. So you can see what the person looks like and what the hair looks like.
And we know that stuff like the Great Wall of Zimbabwe, they're still trying to figure out how that civilization was built because they can't understand its genius to this very day. When we think about things like irrigation, the West only recently was trying to figure out for so long how Africans had managed to do that, in regards to crops and all sorts. So we know that, our people have been great for a very, very long time. And this perception that we can no longer be great, we cannot be great, we've never been great, but guess what? We will be great when we get a piece of paper that is given by a white establishment or an educational system based on white, morals and ideology. That's when we're intelligent. And I have a big problem with this. Why? Well, let me start with this. As I've been decolonizing my mind, it made me actually start to investigate and force myself to take my elders seriously, because I understood that colonization and a colonized mind made me underestimate the genius of our ancestors, and not just ancestors, of our elders, of our forefathers, our fathers, our great-grandfathers, our grandfathers. It made us underestimate their intelligence. Why? Because they didn't speak with a European accent, meant they're not intelligent. We always knew our parents. We loved our parents, right? They're our parents. We got love for them. They have told us, they've warned us about things in our life before. They have led us the way at times. But, in general, did you believe that your parents or your mother's wisdom was a reflection of the place that she came from? And it was a big shock for me, growing up and coming to this realization, because I realized that, it was a conflict. I was very conflicted because I always knew my parents had more depth than my white counterparts. I always knew this, if I'm going to be honest with you. And I believe this is factual. Why? I believe what gives you depth in life a lot of times is going through things. I think that's why the African people are this force to be reckoned with on this planet Earth, because of what we've gone through continuously. We're like this whack-a-mole that people cannot seem to knock down, and we just keep popping up in every single place. And that's why when they're talking about migrants and you think African, that they're talking about the next person. No, you bear in mind they're trying to tell you something without telling you something. They want to get rid of you. They just knew they couldn't get rid of you, so they'll talk about the other ones. But we are definitely a big topic when people are thinking about migrants taking over. Definitely Black people are on the top of that list. What is it that's made us great then? what is this essence that makes Africans who we are? I talked about one of my podcasts I put on the screen. I think it was cultural upbringing. And I spoke about the essence that we think that intelligence is sitting with when a black excellence is now when you're in a suit surrounded by white people, and wow, you've made it now. And we are very colonized in our mind, where we have related everything to white in his system. I talked about how someone very dear to me, from his bottom of his chest, said to me, I believe the white man was created first. God created the white man first, and then he created the black man after. Let me rephrase. He says, sometimes I ask God, did you? And then he continued with saying the Bantu people are stupid, like African black people were stupid. So there obviously is a self-loathing that comes to the African. And the main goal when it comes to pursuing this topic about racism is when you identify the devil, you begin to identify what the devil did, which is very important. And once you do that, it's like identifying sin. And then you begin to identify, we all know, I guess, lust is a sin in the Bible, right? But we can begin to identify what is lust. So then you know that, okay, something as simple as looking at a woman is not just lust. And one of the things I learned in my crystal journey is that when you find yourself even trying to prepare yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the mirror, or put on a certain clothing so you can be appreciated in a certain way, let me put on this shirt because my muscles really show in this shirt. That's a form of lust. You are hoping to get gaze that is in a lustful manner. So you still have to check yourself. And you have to microanalyze yourself. So that's why I found that the topic of racism is very important. Because once you begin to understand the psychology and the consciousness of white people, you begin to understand what we were entrapped in. And what we were entrapped in for a very long time was trying to not step on anybody's toes and how we can operate. James Baldwin has an amazing term. I'm going to paraphrase it, but he said, I know you better than you know me. I've had to watch you this whole time. Watch what you don't like. Watch what you do like. And try my utter best not to piss you off. So a lot of times, black people, we understand them. And this has made us lose sight of who we are. You understand what I'm saying? So let me talk about education. I was having a conversation with my mom today. Well, not today. I was having a conversation with her recently, and I asked her explicitly, because I was having this thing about black people worshiping the white man's idea of education. And a brother, came on my DM and had a dialogue with me about that. I was like, I beg to differ, man. I don't believe that's true because, education is the key. It's how you even left me a nice compliment and said how you can beautifully articulate your messages because you're well educated. And I said, okay, yes, brother, but you missed a very important point of that message. This is what I stressed to him about that message you didn't get. And it was the white man's idea of education. The word education in itself is brilliant. The word knowledge in itself is brilliant. But we have such a limited, let me put this in. My mom always tells me stories about how she would go to the rural areas of Africa and she'd be so amazed. I think she said the girls she knew from boarding school, either her boarding school was in the rural, I'm not sure, whatever. I have to figure that out again. And she'd be so amazed at how much these young girls knew. Things that you throw in a Western kid there in the midst of Africa, they wouldn't have a clue, even after some time living there. But these kids have a huge intelligence, education of knowing, you see when the crop is moist like this, that means it's going to start growing faster. If you see when it starts doing like this, we have to know it's going to rain soon. Like things that were not like normal people didn't know. They had this capacity, and there were young girls, teens, who had this amazing capacity to know crops, to know harvest, to know the weather, to understand when the day was a certain temperature, that even a certain temperature what way it was going to be the next day, right? And just magnificent, I guess, agricultural abilities and knowledge. But on the white man's standards, that's not considered wisdom. So I was so amazed when one said to me explicitly today, if I could do it again, I would homeschool you. I said, what? Yeah, if I could do it again, I would homeschool you. I would, and I know I'd get a better result. And that, I thought that, I was like, you're just, because she's always said it, right? She's always said it, but I was like, be for real, like, you actually would homeschool me, because she looked at me then, I mean it, Harrison, I would homeschool you. You know, that's quite radical, isn't it? Because I think we've overly bigged up the educational system. We have to remember where the educational system came from. When the Industrial Revolution came about, they wanted to know how they were going to program people to live a certain way, think a certain way, and operate a certain way. And I was talking to my brother the other day, and I really appreciated it. One of my friends, I said, he said to me, because he's had a son, and his son is now starting to school, and it's hitting him like, wow, from the moment my kid turns 4, they're going to begin programming him to think a certain way, to move a certain way, to act a certain way, to be a certain way. I've got so much I want to mention today. This is awesome. And there's so much gray areas, so much things that they leave out. I understand that we feel like we can get the basics are there. But with all that time that you give to a school, not to mention your teachers, we don't even know what kind of character they have. Oh my God. And I'm talking about black people now. Okay, white people's, okay. Now black people, especially when it pertains to Ireland. You've got this majority of my teachers. I think one of my teachers said that they had never taught black boy before until they came to school. You know, and I'm going to get into a very important topic, but I just don't want to get it because once I go there, I'm going to start running off there. The teacher doesn't really truly understand you as a black boy. I was talking to a young lady today, very intelligent young lady. She's studying to do medicine. And I think she was talking about, you know, I forget the term, but basically I think it had to do with pregnancy. She mentioned medical terms without forgetting that she was talking to a non-medicine student. She was like, oh yeah, a lot of men want to train to do, and I think it got to do with women. And then they're like, okay, yeah, a man can be trained to do it. That's fair. But there's something in a woman that gives her an innate ability to excel in that job being a woman. Do you get what I mean? Which is why you should push to have women in their roles unless we truly can't have that. And I feel like we are forced to be, oh yeah, their favorite word, colorblind. It's not about being colorblind. It's about seeing color and loving someone for their difference. I was talking to a young man today, a very close friend of mine. He's 19 years old, and I look out for him. And he's Igbo, or Igbo. And as I was looking at this young man, he was telling me his struggles, and he's telling me he had a white carer dealing with him as he's having mental illness problems. And the problem is that you've got this Igbo, and when you look at him, beautiful features, strong features. We're of a different kind. We're of a different kind. The roots, the bloodline will never align with that of a British boy or an English boy. And whenever someone's character, especially our black boys, do not line up with the system that they have put here or the behavior, and I think a lot of time we pull our hair out trying to look wigs, trying to come across as Western, as European in our aura as possible. And then one of my friends also messaged me saying, Harrison, what's acting black? I think you should be careful because we don't want to put black people in a box. I most certainly think that there is definitely a difference in culture. The same way I can tell a Polish woman from an Irish woman just by their demeanor. And that is totally fine. Right? That is totally fine. They're Europeans, but as well, I can tell some similarities. I feel one of the most amazing things about African people, and I don't want to give ourselves borders, because remember, the white man gave us borders. One thing that conjoins us, how we raise our kids, every black kid, the most majority around across the board, we have that culture of our upbringing, which was very similar to each other's. So I believe there is a DNA in an African, in essence, I'll get back to that, in which you can see that this is an African. This person comes from the motherland. And I think it's amazing that you can even look at African Americans who are so different to us in many ways, but in many ways you can see those are Africans. Why? I can just tell in that person's DNA it's an African. And I think that's something we should hone in on as we fight to seek the essence of the black man. So I got so much I want to get through here. I'm getting really fuzzy, but I wanted to bring up another point that I thought earlier about an elder that I always see. I mention him a lot. He's 70 years old. And I try my best to hone in on the wisdom of elders, because a lot of them feel they weren't educated in Europe. They're forgotten. They're not anything. They're nobody. That's what we've been indoctrinated to believe, that African elder who didn't get a chance to go to get a degree in college in the West, or even Africa, but he brought his kids and his kids got the education, and now he feels as though his kids are greater. And I think that's what's happening with the European kid. He's losing his sense of self because he's feeling we build the narrative, go fly past me. I'm just an uneducated African. You are now going to get to flourish in the white man's world, and that will give me great joy and great pride. But as I search for myself, and as I eliminate the chains in my mind of colonized mind and decolonize my mind, I begin to realize the very people who act like they're civilizing and saving the world are destroying it. We're looking at climate change. We're looking at depression rates at an all-time high. We're looking at families who don't even know how to communicate. We forget all this and we look at the fact that I can shoot this on an iPhone. Wonderful. I can have a Mac laptop here. Africans were never materialistic to begin with. But I'm dropping that, and as I remove the scales from my eyes, I'm realizing these people are wise. Whoa, what do you know? An African elder who didn't go to college is wise, just from depth of life, wisdom. And he'll probably teach you a thing or two about agriculture and crops and farming and the good old days, how to live and survive. If this whole world crashed tomorrow, Africans would definitely survive out of all these people. And Andrew Tate and all those guys are making, the Red Pill boys are saying that, let's go back to what men made men, manly men, all the conservatives. Well, if that was the case, the African would be the manliest man. He sat with me, he told me, I said, please, I call him Chief, tell me, what do you remember from your upbringing? He said to me, I love this. Oh God, I'm just so emotional. He was surprised to see a young man in Europe with a Western accent have any interest in what an old African man has to say. And I could always tell the surprise on his face when I would just be so into whatever he has to say. And one day I told him why I think, the way I think, and how I think, and the penny dropped from that. Wow, no wonder. European kids are trying to climb in Europe. No one's trying to get to the root of what makes them African. They no longer worship the white man's world and his ideas and his ideologies. They're toxic. And frankly, why would I want to excel in his world when I figure out what made me special? Band together and remind my people what made us special and rise up and become the world superpower again. You only go so far while he is passing you your rights. How about get a knowing of self and taking rather than asking? So he's surprised. Why? I asked him, tell me about your childhood. He goes, I remember a lot, Ghanaian accent. So tell me. He said, and out of all stories, he says, I remember my mom, when I would be sick, they would take me to the forest. She would cut a bark from a tree. She would pick another leaf, pick something there, pick something there. I used to hate it. It would be disgusting. Put it in hot water. When the hot water when the hot water cools down, pour it in a cup, drink it, you're better in a few minutes. They didn't do a degree, y'all. They didn't do a degree. I'm obsessed now with honoring my African elders. From fathers or friends who I once knew, anybody, obsessed with honoring my African elders, men and women. Because I now know the truth. I'm not indoctrinated by Western ideology. I now know that anybody who came from Africa, you are the real salt of the earth. You are the real perseverer. You are the real... the problem with the world is that it's a status battle, not an intellect battle. It's a status battle. And certain elements to this world give you status. And then we base success off those elements. Okay, if you have this, if you have that, if you have that. Let's talk, guys. I love talking to this old man every time, greeting him, giving him time, learning from old African and learning. So we're gonna get into the educational system. So you hear the tempo I'm on. You hear what I'm trying to pick at right now. So today I come across this video of Moms for Liberty takes on Joy Reid on MSNBC. And I want to let you in on something. I don't know how much this is going to play, but I'm looking for a certain section.
The single most explosive trend in the education culture war is about books and who exactly gets to remove them or challenge them, who gets to decide what we have access to, what can be taught and what can be read. Attempts to ban books have reached a record high, and titles with LGBTQ themes remain top targets. Books about African-American history, too, with stories about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Ruby Bridges removed from shelves. Parents, educators, and students are taking sides. And at the center of this fiery debate is Moms for Liberty, a group founded in 2021 that campaigns for book removals in U.S. public schools. So let me point you to some statistics, because the question becomes then who gets to decide what all kids get to read. The Washington Post took a look at about 1,000+ book challenges that were filed, and they found that they were filed nationwide by just 11 people. Each of these people brought 10 or more challenges against books in their school district. Together, these serial filers constituted 6% of all book challengers, but they were responsible for 60% of filings. Here are some of the parents that are filing, or some of your advocates. Mm-hmm. Bridget Ziegler the Moms for Liberty co-founder, the wife of the recently ousted Florida Republican Party chairman, Christian Ziegler, who allegedly was involved in threesomes, same-sex threesomes. Mrs. Ziegler was removed from the school board at which she was a leader. You've had
she wasn't
Lauren,
removed
one
from
moment.
the school board.
Okay, you have Lauren DePaula. She was making book ban requests in Alachua County, but then records show that she and her husband didn't live there. They'd sold their home in that county. Carrie Blair in Tennessee, who was arrested for property theft charges after allegedly stealing from Target, skip scanning in Target. Why should those three people get to make decisions about what other children should be able to read? Other parents' children should be able to read.
And that's all I wanted to get through. You know, I know in my spirit, I know in my heart, I know in my spirit. Today I was talking about a girl about Big Pharma. And I was telling her, because we're discussing about her you know, like a family friend of mine. And I was kind of saying, you know, we're discussing about my brother who's going through some difficulties. And I feel as we put a lot of trust in these people who are human beings, who are not Christians. We don't know what morals they live off. We don't know what more. We don't know their love of, the Bible says the love of money is the root of evil. Not money, the love of money. These are people who love money overall. So we as African people have to assess who we put our trust in. They create systems such as this. You heard the type of people they have who are creating systems. And my point is, the word education is wonderful. The word knowledge is wonderful. Great civilizations were built before there was ever such thing as a school day invented. But I believe and I know from the bottom of my heart, because the worth of the Negro, the white man made the Negro believe that once you have a degree, you will then become my equal. So every African made it their destiny that my child, if I couldn't, will have a degree, will wear that gown. And we worship the gown. We don't even really know what we want our kids to wear. We worship and we want our children to think inside the box. What if you have a child that will think outside that box and revolutionize Africa, revolutionize the world, and how it's centered around Eurocentric ideology of life? But we don't even give our children hope for that, because black parents are beating their children to finish a degree. You're not trying to analyze your child and figure out if your child is greater than the school system. Because remember, human beings created the human system. Just sort of very flawed people with intentions to make children and people zombies that they can go into work and become more zombies again. I'm telling you, I'm not going to discuss about what they're arguing about, but I think a very, very valid point was made. Who is to say what goes in and what goes out? Who is to say what goes in, what goes out? Men are making decisions about your children and what your children can learn or what they cannot learn. What is considered intelligence, what is not. I want to play you one more video. I'm only going to play the first few seconds of it. But there's this very intelligent man on Instagram who I found. And I want to quickly play you guys what he said, just so you can understand what I'm trying to get at.
We have become educated slaves. See what I mean? When the people that enslaved you are the same people that educated you, the best they can give you is an education of conformity, but never an education of freedom and progress. They will never give you education of freedom and progress. What it means is that even if all of us becomes professors, we can still not be able to solve our local needs. Because it is an education of conformity. They've already set things, and you are educating yourself to conform to it. That is not true education. That is education of bondage. And that is why we can't produce. Because production comes with education that gets something out of something. Not education that conforms you to a pattern. But that is what they gave us. That's what they gave us. Africa, we need to rethink all of these things and create another kind of curriculum for our needs. Do you know that some schools in Nigeria advertise their school with the fact that they teach with British curriculum? And people are enrolling their kids there. The question is, why are you equipping our kids to solve British problem and not our Nigerian problem? What happens to our Nigerian problem? Now you see now why everybody is going out of Nigeria. Every child, every adult saying Nigeria does not have hope. How can a country have hope when we are learning to solve other people's problems? That is a slave mentality. And unless we start deconstructing those mentalities, we will suffer here. There will not be a place for our kids to live in. All of our kids will migrate because there will be nothing left here.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. Wonderful, 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 very intelligent man. And I'll make this last point. We cannot continue this generational curse that wisdom is only attached to whiteness. We want to raise a generation of revolutionaries. I can't believe when Africa got its independence, they assured that children, when they should have been rearing our parents in Africa, to find out how we were going to fight back and retaliate. So how do African parents say our leaders are corrupt when you yourself know the schooling you got in Africa, if any had got schooling, the upbringing you got was not of a mentality of revolution? Because there's only one mentality that could have been necessary after coming out of independence. There's only one. Irish kids were learning what the British did to them. That's why now you couldn't wear a British jersey on Paddy's Day in Dublin. Because they know you could wear an English jersey anywhere on Africa on any Independence Day. Nobody cares. We were not taught to have a backbone. We are still mentally enslaved. And that's all I have for today. But I just want to talk about our worship of the white man's education and his idea of what intelligence means. And that's when they say people like Jordan Peterson are the most intelligent man in the world. He's got it going for himself. But what world is that? We haven't put the wonderful men in Africa in that. I can bet you they didn't put the wonderful men in Africa in that census. I can go to the rural ends of Africa. And that's why he says crazy stats about Africans. I remember one time he was debating with somebody, or one of his videos said, women here are complaining about lack of freedom. Try go to Africa. There's no freedom for women. Keep your ideas to yourself unless you live in Africa. You don't understand our cultures. You don't understand the depths of who we are. Yet the West always make these census and these documentaries when you don't know our culture. And then we Africans inhale and internalize how we know he perceives about that. So we want to reject that so he can accept us. Well, you'll always be second best. You'll always be a second-class citizen. There is a wonderful essence of the African waiting to conquer in strength and in love. But for as long as you're enslaved, as long as you don't understand, you run away from this topic in order to appease your master. You need to dive into this topic. There's an essence to the Negro that was lost in colonialism. And the only way to find it is to reject what came with that. If I gave you a coffee right now and I put a little bit of poison in it, would you drink it? We have to take everything we got in the West with a pinch of salt. I don't care how much money you think a certain job will get your children. It's a mentality that will make them great, not a pay, not a residual. It's a mentality that will put them in the history books, that will make your child be somebody that is remembered in this lifetime. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to get into this topic again another time. It's a very, very extensive topic, and I want to get into it, and I want to really, really dive into it. But we're running out of time, and that's all we got right now. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.
And I'm on a mission for you.